Hey, Tim, it's so nice to have you on the Everything Saxophone podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Donna. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, same here. So you have, first of all, I've heard of you for many, many years. You played with so many great people, and I love the way you play. And then I heard you have this book. I got to hold it up.
Woo-hoo.
The Jazz Saxophone book.
Okay. Isn't that a pretty cover?
I love this color. This is awesome. Yeah. Okay, this is nice. Great. But it's not even just the color of the cover. It's the binding is amazing. Okay, I don't have to sit there and fold down the pages. It's it's
on a music stand. Yeah.
Yes, it's spiral bound, and this. Okay, and I have to say this too. Tim's book's been out for about a month or two or so, something like that. Maybe actually 3 months. It took me, because it's doing so well and selling out, it took me a month to get it.
Again, woohoo!
I know. I'm so happy for you, because you know what? You deserve this, because as I'm looking through this, and also, what's really great about this book, we're going to go through it. And what's great that Tim did, he also created a whole bunch of YouTube videos, because you've got to hear, when you're dealing with like theory and other concepts. Tim knows, back in the day when we did that, like we had these really boring textbooks and stuff like that, and you had to run and find a piano if you didn't have one to try to play what they were talking about in the book. Now you've got videos, great videos that display the concepts, and congratulations on your book. That's what I just have to say. It's really great.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted that you think so, and I'm also proud to say I've gotten a lot of feedback in that direction. And what I was aiming to do was make a book that was practical to use. There's so many books that talk about theory and they lay it out in a book, and there's, as you say, there's no oral relationship, AURAL, oral relationship to the information you're getting. And I wanted to write a book that was both connected to the tradition. So, if I talk about a concept if I'm talking about harmonic minor, I direct you immediately to Hank Mobley using the harmonic minor and swinging it.
Yes.
And I want people to hear that and become, and fall in love with it. I want you to fall in love with the harmonic minor, not just absorb it as some information. So I've tried very hard I spent a lot of time trying to make it come alive as much as I could do that outside of a one-on-one relationship, with a student. And to the extent that that's been successful, I'm very happy.
No, for sure. And you know what? Even before we get into your background, I think let's stay on this topic. What inspired you to actually, to write this book? How did you conceive of this?
Well, I've been teaching for a long time. I kind of fell into a teaching job when I first moved to Holland in the mid 80s, a long time ago. I had a very, very incredible, inspiring teacher in Charlie Shoemake when I was going to school in Los Angeles. And his method was to give you a solo to work on every week. And you would learn some, Sonny Rollins. I would learn Sonny Rollins' solo on Mambo Bounce, for example. And then in the lesson, you would come in and Charlie would play piano for you. He's a vibes player, but he'd play piano, and you'd play the melody, and then you'd play Sonny Rollins' solo, and then he'd comp for you, and you'd continue to play your own solo. And he had a way, he would never say it, but he had a way of kind of comping you out. He'd like bring you down. If you weren't really happening this week, he'd kind of, he'd let you know. He'd end it. And if you did your homework and you were sounding good, he'd keep going and he'd play some more choruses for you. And so there was a very musician to musician kind of feedback in that. So I had a very good experience and collected a lot of solo transcriptions. And it was easy for me early in my career to turn that around and start teaching right away, because I had all that information and such a great kind of template for teaching. So I've been doing that for a long time. And my goal in writing the book was to speed up the process. Some of the things that I've learned along the way that I wish I'd known 35, 40 years ago, I tried to include those in the book and help people get to the same stuff faster than how long it took me. So that was kind of a main goal. And then the more practical side was I went to the Gen conference down in New Orleans 2 years ago. And I went down to Chuck Sher's booth to say hi. We'd met a few times over the years. And I had the idea of pitching a little book. I was going to pitch a short book to him because I thought melody was something that doesn't get addressed as much in books. Harmony is mathematical. It's kind of easy to teach. It's not that easy to master, but it's easy to teach. And melody is a little more mysterious, a little more, a little harder animal to get a hold of. And I thought some guidance on melody might be interesting and useful. So I went to Chuck to pitch that idea. And he was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I think I might be interested in that. But maybe you could use that as a chapter in a longer book. And I said, that's not really what I had in mind. But I went to bed I said, let me sleep on it. And I went to bed that night. And the next morning, it didn't take any time at all. The next morning, I woke up with this idea, which I call in the book, the anatomy of a song. What kinds of practical things to practice in order to go to a jam session, call a tune, and succeed. And, how to count it off, how to play the melody, what to do with the solo break, what to do during your solo. That, of course, becomes a pretty big section of the book. Trading, communication with the musicians, how to navigate the ending, how to play cadenza, all these things that I've learned about from doing it on the bandstand. I thought it could be useful to share that information. So that was the idea I came with the next day, and Chuck was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that." And I wrote an outline, and then we kind of back and forthed it a little while, and within about a month and a half, we said, "Okay, we're going to do this." And coincidentally, or I don't know what the right word is to describe it, but the pandemic hit 2 months later. And so all of a sudden, I had my 2 years worth of work was just wiped off my calendar, and I was sitting at home, fortunately delighted to be with my wife every day and not on the road. And so I had the space that I could sit down and start writing. And 2 years later, it's a physical thing. It's really nice.
Yeah, a lot of the people that I've been interviewing, actually, even especially during the pandemic, I always ask the question, how have you adapted? And, a lot of great things. I know this sounds terrible, but I don't mean it in that way, but we've adapted, and a lot of great things have come from this, from people like Dana Robbins, who's played with Delbert McClinton. She's in Nashville, and she learned how to record her saxophone playing from home, and she's a part of like these services where you can do that, and to yourself, writing a book, to others, Walt Weiskopf, where he was saying, now I could dive into some of the things I haven't been able to do for years, and just explore them. I think it's really amazing, and I'm glad that you made this adaptation and came up with this. I have to ask a side question here because I know people are going to want to know this. There's always not controversy, but questions about transcribing, how to do it. Do you write it out? Do you is it all by ear? Do you have to transcribe the entire solo? Can you talk about transcribing?
Sure. So as a disclaimer up front, one of the first things I wrote in the book is I'm going to write down in this book the things that have been helpful to me, the things that have been useful to me, the things that have helped me develop what I've developed. And guaranteed, you will find somebody to say the opposite of everything that I've written in this book. And that's the way it is, and that's fine. And I think part of the fundamental nature of the music is that there are some rules that are useful to understand and follow, but breaking them is part of the fun. And so everybody has a different take on it. And of course, what it comes down to is following your own aesthetic vision, which starts from following your own feeling. You hear something and you go, oh man, that is so hip or so beautiful or so powerful. And I need to know what that is. So that's kind of where I start is don't be systematic about it. Don't just let your teacher spoon feed you information, but go find it and follow your own passion. Your own passion isn't quite the right word, but your own spark. When you get that electric spark of like, oh man, I have to know that. That's the thing to transcribe. And so I lay out the way that I would do it now, And in fact, this is exactly the way I do it now. So what I mean to say is I lay it out in the book the way I teach it to my students. And also it comes from, this is what I do myself now. And I just bought a bass clarinet a couple of weeks ago. That's another fun story on the side. But I am following my own program on a new instrument that's, somewhat familiar, but relatively unfamiliar. And so I do practice what I preach. So the stuff that I wrote in the book is from, again, it's meant to be practical. It's meant to be something you can use. And I go out of my way to say, if this doesn't work for you, toss it out, go to the next chapter, or find another book. It's all out there for us to gather and synthesize. There's no one way. So for transcription, what I do is I find something, as I say, that sparks some electricity in me. And then the first thing I do is I learn to sing it. So if I can sing it, so what I'm trying to do, it can become a bit of a long answer, but what I'm trying to do is teach my inner singing voice. I'm trying to teach my inner singing voice a new piece of vocabulary. So especially if it's something unfamiliar, I won't be able to play that if I don't know what it is, right? So it sparked my interest. I learned to sing it, and then the moment that I focus on is the first time you go to play something. So let's say I'm just going to drop my hand on the piano. La da. I didn't really mean to play a triad there, but da da. I just played something random for the purpose of displaying this idea. So what I focus on, I'm tapping my foot now, I'm setting a tempo, 2, 3, 4. And what I focus on is the first time I play this new piece of information, I try to do it in time directly into the saxophone. So I don't noodle around on the horn to try to find where it is. I try to imagine where it is and then just play it. So if I'm going to go, gi-a-da, say that was what I played. Di-a-da, 2, 3. So I got it. I heard it and I was right. If I miss, then I do it something like this. 1, 2, 3. Missed it, but I'm still hearing it in my mind. 3, 4. 3, 4. Okay, I know where I am. 3, 4. Oops, wrong note. 1, 2, 3. So the last time I knew I had it. I knew I was going to get it. So then I decorated immediately. I started improvising as soon as I was sure I knew what the thing was that I was trying to play. So that's the process for me of transcription. So if I'm going to be more methodical and do a solo from start to finish, I'll take the first phrase, I'll learn to sing it. I'll sing it at a tempo that I can manage, not necessarily trying immediately to match the tempo of the recording. Set a tempo that I can manage and try to play the line. And I experiment in time. And the goal, there are two goals in that. One is I want to be training my inner voice to hear new things. But the really critical one is I want to train my technique to deliver what I'm imagining in my mind. Because that's the essence of being an improviser. I'm imagining a melody in my mind and I'm delivering it straight through the saxophone. And that can seem like a kind of a mysterious thing, but it's actually something you can practice every day. And that's what I practice every day. I feel like if I do that exercise every day a little bit, I'm getting better at playing the saxophone without it feeling like work. It's fun. And I'm getting better and I'm improving my vocabulary by adding something new, and I'm improving my ability to deliver through the saxophone directly what I'm imagining in my mind.
And okay, so I have a couple of things to unpack from this for sure. When you're transcribing, first of all, we're going to talk about how beginners can do this. But the other thing too, here's an analogy as well. It's like when we learn our native language, when we're first learning vocabulary words, it's spoken to us. Okay, here's the teacher writing it on the board. Okay, write it down 10 times. Make sure you're spelling it right. And now I want you to make 3 sentences using that word. It's the same type of idea. It's the same type
There it
of
is.
idea for sure. Two things. When you're transcribing, like let's say on the way to a gig yesterday, I heard Sonny Rollins playing on Continuum, and I never heard it before, and I was like,
I
"Oh
don't
my
know that one.
God!" Oh, it was on Sirius XM Real Jazz, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so good." And I'm not going to say thank God I hit a lot of traffic, but this is one time where the traffic benefited me because I wasn't. It kept me from being angry on the road. So
Finding the silver lining. That's the way to be. That's a good place to live.
oh, thank God that it happened. Yes. So Sonny Rollins Continuum. Oh my God, it was so good. But if I tried to transcribe that in time, meaning that, how do you feel about people slowing the track down? Because I know for me, I do slow down things. If I'm not able to hear it, I will slow it down. But there are people that, again, like you said, everybody's got their own opinions, and that's really cool. That's fine. There are people that say, no, you've got to hear it in time, because of it has to deal with the groove and all that kind of thing. And, when you play something slow, it's not the same. But how do you feel about slowing down, things that may be challenging for people in order for them to transcribe?
Absolutely do it. And there's not only one groove. If the thing you were trying to learn was at this tempo, if that was the lick that you picked off, if you can't hear it at that tempo, you slow it down to half speed, but then you go and try to play it in time at that tempo. 2, 3. The point is to be able to groove at whatever the tempo is. And the reason I try to do it in time, if I need to do it at a slower tempo, like here's I think the crux of the matter. If it's too fast and I can't play it at that tempo, and I play it 15 times wrong, I've just practiced to play it wrong. I really don't think that's productive.
Yeah, your brain remembers the mistakes. That's the problem. And then you're going to keep making the mistakes.
Yeah, and if I slow it down so that I can observe myself swinging it, and I can feel the joy of swinging it at that tempo, all of that is positive and going in the direction of building rather than, something that's vague. So my ultimate goal, if it's to play a Sonny Rollins solo, is to play it along with him at his tempo and get it exact so that I really know what it feels like to play that solo. And so that is the goal. But if I can't get there, I can't get there. There's some things, I remember some Charlie Parker solos, early on that I just could not do. And I came to Charlie Shoemake with my head hanging, I can't do this one. He was like, it's okay, man. We'll move on. We'll do another one. It wasn't that big of a deal, It was another great lesson he gave me. But I want to pick up on what you said about the sentences. So one of the things I also talk about in the book is that the really important process, I mean, they're all important, but learning to sing it is the first important process. Learning to deliver it in the saxophone is the second one. But the third one is to take your new piece of vocabulary and improvise with it. Put it in some sentences. So. So I've just had some fun. I've tinkered with it a little bit. I got that from Herbie Hancock's book. He likes to tinker, and I use that word over and over in the book. Take your thing and tinker with it. See what it feels like. See what it feels like to put it up and down a half step. Move it around. Change the rhythm. Start it on a different beat. All these things are ways to start improvising with your new word.
Now, okay, let's go into that even deeper. You're obviously, you've been playing a long time. You're professional. You have a lot more technique, a lot more vocabulary in you. Let's say someone just, I don't even want to say just starting out on their instrument, because there's a lot of people that are classically trained, myself included, and then you go to jazz. And or even people that, let's say, are even beginners on their instrument per se, maybe playing a year or so, right? And and you deliver this beautifully in the book when you use the example of something like Frere Jacques, right? Okay, so I'm going to have you like talk about that particular concept. But if someone that's a beginner, they're tinkering, they cannot expect it to be at the level that you're going to do. But what can they expect to be able to, like, any suggestions for tinkering on their level? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The one of the things that I said later in the book is that I have a beef with educators who, and I'm an educator, so I don't have a beef with educators generally speaking. I teach at Queens College, but I have a beef with educators who say to people, "Oh, the blues is easy. You just take a blues scale and it works on all the chords. You don't have to think about anything."
Yeah.
So, and what you get is people going, "They don't know what a melody is. They haven't been given a melody to work with. They've just been given a scale, and that's giving somebody information to improvise with rather than music. So I think it's worthwhile to remember that this music was born from musicians in New Orleans playing in parades, African American musicians. We should give credit where it's due, playing in parades and funeral marches and concerts and performances where they were, the way I envision it, they were playing the same song a whole bunch of times, maybe 10 choruses in a row as they marched. And some guys who were a little more creative than the others were like, "Yeah, I don't want to play this melody the same way again. I'm gonna have some fun with this." And so they started improvising with the melody. And that's really where that spark is what got us to where we are. That's what started the whole history that got us to where we are now. So if you're playing, so the point being is that improvisation starts with, or in the history of this music, started with people improvising with the melody, people decorating the melody. So if you take Frere Jacques, I can't even play it without improvising a little bit. I can't even start simple. I've been doing this so long. So yeah, just take something familiar and start to decorate it. That's the pathway in.
I love it.
Right? There's all kinds of ways you can go. Just imagining what you can do with the melody, and if that seems difficult with your instrument, just try singing. If you have music inside you, oh diddle da da diddle da. If I can sing that, I can play it. I just have to try. I just have to train myself to do that. That's the training part, is asking your technique to deliver what it is you're singing in your mind's ear. Also, is that when I go to play something new, what I'm trying to do is match what is coming out of the saxophone with what I'm hearing in my inner ear. That's, I think, the process. That's the detail that really helps to bring it home.
Yeah, and excuse me. And we actually, we had talked in the past about. I had referred you to the Gordon Institute of Music Learning and Music Learning Theory, right, and stuff like that. Yeah. This is exactly it. What I'm curious about, actually, there's a couple things I want to say here too. It's almost like that Nike slogan, "Just do it." Because a lot of people are like, "Okay, but wait, I don't know how to sing. I don't like my voice. I can't sing, blah blah blah." But really, the whole thing is that you're taking up an instrument because you want to play, so just do it. If you don't put your foot in the water, you're not going to be able to swim. But when it comes to, excuse me, sorry, when it comes to, like learning how to improvise, let's say, a lot of people feel overwhelmed with all the things they feel they have to or should, in quotes, do. Right. So can you address that at different levels? Meaning that, a beginner's not going to know, they don't know what they don't know. Right. The dangerous spot is going to be for people that are in that intermediate stage where they know a bit, but then, And yes, I put videos out on YouTube. A bunch of my friends do as well. I get it. You're getting barraged with all this information and all this kind of stuff. It gets overwhelming. Can you address like what people would do at various stages, like beginner, intermediate, advanced, addressing that whole should thing?
Yeah, I have a student who right now who actually I have two of them who are who consistently come to the lessons with, God, I feel so overwhelmed. There's just so much to do. I can't even get started. And I can totally relate, and especially now with the internet, it's all there. How
Yes.
do you assimilate the entire brain of human history? It's a big challenge. And of course, we're now more than 100 years into jazz history. So whereas the people in the 30s only had one generation of musicians behind them to assimilate and then innovate from, now we're in the fifth or sixth generation, and so there's just an enormous amount of information. That's the bottom line. So at the very most basic level, for people who are nervous about improvising, generally speaking, the thing I usually say is, you do it every single day. You and I right now are improvising.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say. We're listening to each other. And as a result of that listening, we're bouncing things back and forth. And the stuff that we're talking about is coming up naturally. Sorry, Reed. The stuff we're talking about is coming up naturally, right? It's a completely natural process that every one of us does every single day. So there's no need to be afraid of improvising because you already are good at it. It's a question of learning a new language. So you're talking about learning the language of swing or bebop or modern jazz, whatever attracts you. So it's no big deal on one level. And then on another level, it took you 12 or 15 years to be a very articulate speaker of English. And if you've ever tried to learn a foreign language, you know that it takes, I've studied a few, so I have experienced the process of it taking 6 months of like feeling stupid. I can't, I don't have the words to express myself. I feel like an idiot, I don't know how to say, what time is it in Japanese, so I can't ask. And so that first 6 months is incredibly awkward. The second 6 months, you start to feel a little like, oh, okay, I can navigate a little bit. And into the second and third year, you're starting to be able to feel comfortable. And then there comes a point, for me, in Japanese, there came a point where I had a dream in Japanese. And I was like, oh my God, I just had a dream in Japanese. I guess I speak this language now. And it just, there was a click, and I was fluent in Japanese. Conversationally, I'm not as comprehensive in my knowledge of Japanese as I would like to be, but I can hold a conversation comfortably. And the same thing is true with music. It's you have to learn the language, but you also have to converse with people. You have to find out. I wouldn't have known that I didn't know how to ask how to say what time is it in Japanese until I encountered that situation where I needed to ask that question. So if you don't go to jam sessions and you don't know that you, as you say, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you don't know the song Simone until you hear it and you go, oh man, Frank Foster, yeah, wow, what a cool tune. I need to learn that. So you have to put yourself in the arena, and it's uncomfortable. It's just a drag for the first year. And you can't hang. You don't have the ability yet, but you can see what people are doing, and you can see how much joy they're getting out of it, and so that's the motivator that keeps you going back, hopefully.
Right. And so then on each different level, I guess it's going to depend on the situations that you put yourself in. Like for very beginners, they're not going to be going to a jam session right away. They've got to start to attain the knowledge.
On the other hand, I think they should.
Really interesting. Okay.
They shouldn't necessarily bring their horn out.
Oh, got it. Yeah, sure.
If they don't have the ability yet, they don't need to bring their horn out. But if I'm a sort of a wannabe surfer. I did some windsurfing younger in my life, earlier in my life, and I've been on a surfboard a few times. I don't have ability, but I have love. And if I went to Hawaii and was had a chance to go to the beach at Pipeline, I wouldn't just jump on a board and go out in the waves. I wouldn't do that. I would sit on the beach and I would watch the waves and I would watch the surfers and I would see what they do and see what the sort of, accumulated knowledge is about surfing at Pipeline. And then maybe I would take 10 years to learn how to surf, and then maybe I would try to go out in those waves someday. Right? So
Yeah.
that's talking about it on the expert level. And then just to say one more thing about the sort of next level, I think once you get into it and you know you want it, you want this, then I think a relationship with a teacher is the important next step, is to have somebody who you trust, who can guide you and help identify the step-by-step process that can make you improve fast, that can help you to improve faster.
And it's interesting you said the word process too, because I do feel, I've got my own courses for this too, and I do feel there is a process to it. I love what you said before. We learn the things that we want to learn. Like you said, something sounds really cool, something sounds hip. I want to play that. I know a lot of people feel like they have to. There's a lot of people that, don't like Charlie Parker. It's okay. Maybe they don't want to play like, they don't want to play bebop. They may have some appreciation of it, but, they feel like, I just want to improvise over my church music, or I want to just play blues. Why do I have to study Charlie Parker or this or that or whatever? Actually, let me ask you that question. How if someone says that to you, what do you respond?
Yeah, you don't. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Nobody says you have to study Charlie Parker. If you want to become an improviser who is incredibly deep, incredibly swinging, rhythmically fascinating, harmonically sophisticated, melodically showing the level of imagination that's magnificent, then you study Charlie Parker. But if you have more modest goals and you have some music that you're attracted to, go for that. That's why, as they say, I don't know who says this actually, but that they say that's why they raise horses. There's a guy who raises horses. There's a woman who raises horses. I don't raise horses. That's not what I was born to do.
Okay.
So we find you find what you were born to do, and then you gather the tools to advance you along your path.
Yeah, and yeah, that's actually perfect. And I think too, you gather, again, you're inspired by what you feel you like and that you want to pursue. Isn't that true for everybody? A lot of people didn't do well in high school, but I know this is true for my classmates. There were some classmates that some did okay, some didn't really enjoy high school, but man, they became doctors because they were inspired later on. And I think that's an awesome way to go for sure. And the other thing too, I wanted to touch upon as well, we're having a conversation right now. Like in my mind, I think of my certain basic questions, but I did not start this. There goes my greyhound. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I had my cat in the background a little while ago too. The joys of Zoom.
Yeah, that's right. It's awesome. But and she just made me lose my train of thought. Oh my God, she just made me lose my train of thought.
I love it. So now you have to improvise your way out of this moment.
Yes, I do. And you know what? This is perfect. This is a great example because now I remember what I was saying. I have some general ideas of what I want to ask people, and I do my research and stuff. But, we started off, I'm thinking, I'm going to wait to get his bio until later because we're talking about his book. And because we have a command of the language that we're speaking right now, which is English, we can do that. We can improvise. And as you're speaking, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, oh, you know what? I'm curious about that. And I'm not looking, I'm writing my notes, of course, but I'm not looking at, I don't have any questions on my notepad for you. I'm just writing down notes of things that, oh, this is a great point. I want to bring that out, So I just wanted to say that to people because if you can speak a conversation with somebody, you can improvise.
There it is. Yep. And you can, and everybody can. I'm not every single person, but I would say most of the people who are involved in music are capable of experiencing improvisation if you just put your antennas up for it and notice that that's what you're doing.
Yeah, not only that too, though, I also think, again, you kind of alluded to this, and I kind of said it in a sense outright. It's the fear of taking that step. I love the way you talked about like the fear and kind of embracing the fear. It is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable at first, but you know what? One of my mantras is get comfortable in the uncomfortable. If you're not making yourself uncomfortable a little bit each day, in my mind, for me, this is for me, folks, if I'm not making myself a little bit uncomfortable each day, I just don't feel like, that's not a great day for me. I'm just stagnating. That's
Yep.
me.
You and me, we're just the same.
Yeah. So,
So
I just love.
let me give a demonstration of that.
Oh,
Actually,
awesome.
that's the first thing I do with my practice day, and these days I'm doing it on bass clarinet, which is even more uncomfortable because I don't feel as fluid on that instrument as I do with the saxophone. But what I do at the beginning of my practice day is I play a fifth at the bottom of the piano. I just drop my hand on A and E, and put it a little lower just for fun. I drop my hand at the piano and I hold the sustain pedal down. And I have two rules for myself for this exercise. The first is I don't play anything that I'm not hearing in my mind first. So I imagine a melody and then I try to play it. And the second rule is I don't play anything I have already played before. In other words, I'm very specifically trying to play melodies, imagine melodies in real time, and play stuff that I do not know. And that's my way of putting myself into that space of I don't know what's going to happen. It might work and it might not work.
Oh my God, I love that. I love
I don't know if
that.
you can hear it, but the piano is ringing with the notes. That's nice.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that melody.
I never played that melody before. Okay, that was completely new. And here's one thing that I like to get to. I think I'm going to call my next recording that's coming out in the fall "The Inevitable Note." So here's one of the things that I do do to sort of play a game with myself. There's my first melody. What's the next note?
Yeah.
That's the inevitable note. Okay, so I've played a melody. I've played a melody as a question, and then I've played a second melody as an answer to that question. And now I can either play the inevitable note or I can do something else. Okay, so. I made you wait for it. Okay, that's one way to do it. Or I can say. So that time, instead of playing the note as the answer, the last note as the answer of my second phrase, I used it to begin the third phrase and kept it hanging in the air. And then I'm trying to be conscious of the motion of the music. I'm trying to let the music, the melodies determine how I get back home to one. And what I try to do is play a question, an answer, maybe one more development phrase, and then see if I can get back home to the root. Well, I'll just do one more. Here's just one more with a new melody that I haven't played before.
That's awesome.
You see the idea? So I'm putting myself into that space where I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm trying to hear my way to the conclusion.
Let me
And I
ask
do that
you.
every day.
Let me ask you this question. First of all, that was awesome, and some of those melodies. Wow. Okay. What if you get someone? Now, again, I know you teach at Queens College. Man, I wish you were there when I was there. I was there a long time ago. Damn it. But what if you get? And I don't know if you would get a very beginner type of student. I doubt it. But let's say someone says to you, "Oh, but I don't have any melodies in my head." What do you do?
I teach in the graduate program, so I'm mostly teaching graduate students, but I do get music ed students occasionally who are not improvisers, and that question comes up all the time.
Okay.
And excuse me. So there's a couple of different ways to solve that problem, and one of them is to do what I did early in our conversation, which is just drop my hand on the piano. So. There's a little melody. We lay da da, le da da di da da da, de ah ha di da da da. So I just look for some different ways to embellish that melody. And I'm not a good singer, but I can approximate what I need to do, and that's why I play the saxophone, because I can make that melody sound really pretty with the saxophone. Otherwise, I'd be a singer. So that's one way, and then I will, if I'm in the room with them, I'll give them one. I'll say, here's one, and I'll play something on the saxophone, and I'll ask them to sing it, and ask them to play it on the saxophone or flute. I get violinists and flutes and trumpet players. I'll teach anybody, and after they've learned to play that melody, if they are having difficulty with trying to find an answer on the saxophone, I'll ask them to sing one. And I'll maybe play a chord to help them hear a sound to relate to. And as you sort of said, you just dive in, you jump in, do it, just go for it. And I've learned over the years to say to people when I ask them to do this exercise, I've learned to say to them, you will get to a point, probably a month or two in. The first month you're going to be like, wow, this is such a cool thing. I've never done this before. I love it. And about a month in, you're going to arrive at the point where you've played everything you know. And it's harder to imagine something new. You're going to get there. And my response is, that's great. That's what you want, because after you've played everything you know, you have to really start improvising.
I thought you were going to say something different. I thought you were going to say, no, this is great. And I thought you were going to say, okay, now, listen to another artist or listen to, another style of music or something, just to kind of pique your imagination.
Yeah. And both of those answers are valid. That's another way. If you're in need of some new information to teach your inner voice, that's an ongoing part of the process. That's always happening. Sort of when you get to that point where you get frustrated, that's the beginning. That's the doorway in. That's when you've hit a limit, and I think most people's response to, or the way we're sort of culturally trained, is when we hit a limit, we get frustrated, like, oh, I'm limited. But that's actually the moment to go, oh, okay, now I see what my boundary is, and here's what I need to do to expand beyond the boundary. That concept works for me in relationship, in when I'm struggling to understand something, if I'm having a misunderstanding with somebody, and I think most of us have had that experience where you're just like, this is just never going to work. Mm. And then if I take some distance and say, okay, with my current ability, I'm unable to get past this impasse. I can either keep fighting, or I can try to expand my range, and then maybe see if I can find a skill that will help me get out of this impasse. And that's when you have to ask for somebody else for some help.
Yeah, and let me go back to when you played I've got my keyboard right here, right? So you play these three notes, or even whatever it is. You play three notes on the piano. Even if, okay, and I should say this for people, I grew up, I didn't have a piano. in the house. I had a monophonic keyboard when I was in like seventh grade or something like that. But I just want to say this for people. There's apps like Tonal Energy. Get an app where you can generate pitches so you can hear it, and it even like you go to the sound wheel, you go to the keyboard function, and it's like a piano on there. So let me just say that too. But what if you get okay, let's say a person doesn't have access to a teacher. They're in a country, like I have some students like this, they found me online, but, they don't have access to a teacher, let's say, and, they don't want to do the online thing, whatever. And then they're doing this and they're like, but, I don't really hear anything in my head. One of the things that I tell my students, just I don't call it tinker, I actually call it noodling. I took that word that's derogatory in jazz circles,
nice.
and I
Turned
just
it around.
Turn it around, absolutely. Noodle. Take these 3 notes and just throw spaghetti at the wall for a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's the opposite of my, I hear it, sing it, play it. That's my thing. Exactly what, you've been talking about. Yeah, this is a Gordon, this is a music learning theory type of thing. And actually I learned this long time ago from my trumpet teacher, Vince Panzarella. But the thing, throw some spaghetti on the wall, and then eventually you may find some stuff that sticks. Do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, any advice for people that just really don't have access to a teacher or something like that, and, really just 3 note, what do I do?
Yeah, two things. One is your spaghetti example. I was very inspired by the letters of Vincent van Gogh to his brother when I was younger. I encountered that book when I was living in Holland. And one of the things he said was that one of the things Vincent said to his brother was, the scariest moment for me is when I step in front of a blank canvas. And he said, sometimes I just don't know what to start with. And he said, I discovered after some time that if I just tossed some paint on the canvas, there was something to get started with. And then then the picture eventually started to take some shape. So as you say, throw some spaghetti against the canvas and then see if that helps you get towards a picture. And then another way that I learned, this is a little more advanced concept, but one of the things I learned from Gene Jackson, the great drummer, is to play along with recordings, imagining that you're in the band, on the bandstand or in the recording studio with the band that's playing. So not just using it as a sort of a play along track, but taking it a step further and seeing if you can play something that feels good and feels like that music feels and fits with that music, and work in that way until you feel like you can hang with that recording. And that doesn't have to be Charlie Parker or Herbie Hancock. That can be, any number of things.
Yeah, it could be a blues. It could be, a great recording. I love Stanley Turrentine, and I think about like Back at the Chicken Shack, cool tune, right. Something like that with a groove like that, or
or it can be Bulgarian folk songs. It can be
that's
any
true.
number of different things.
That's right. Yeah, or any style that you want. I mean, if it's if it's R&B, if it's lo-fi, if it's dance music or whatever. Yeah, for sure. All right.
Is available to all of us.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, as we were talking and we're talking about improvisation, one of the things that I did want to do from your amazing book is that on page 5, I took this excerpt because before you played Frere Jacques, and that was awesome. And everybody saw and heard, what you did with that. And I just wanted to read this one excerpt in here. It's under like video 1, Frere Jacques. And you said, notice in the video, I'm starting out by improvising with something known, a melody, right? Okay, simple melody. Another of the misconceptions out there is that jazz improvisation is completely new every time. Like it's being born every time someone plays a solo. In fact, it's much closer to a conversation where 99.9% of the words already exist, and it's the discovery of fresh combinations of known elements that makes it fascinating.
Yeah. Who wrote that?
It's brilliant.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were talking about this whole time, and it's funny because I do encounter a lot of people, when they put comments on my YouTube videos, or they send me emails or comments on my Facebook ads or whatever. Oh, jazz improvisation, you don't practice that. It just, it just comes out of you. You can't practice that. And I just sit there and I'm like, oh my God.
You're discounting all those hours I put in.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, part of my goal also for writing this book was to take some of the mystique out of it. To say this is actually some stuff that with some practical discipline you can get to it. And when I guess the difference from learning a language is when you were a kid, you didn't have developed attention yet. Your mother and father or brother and sister or whoever it was that was teaching you to speak your native language, they just taught it to you. You didn't really have any choice in the matter. So the process was completely organic and not really in your hands. So the difference here is that, generally you're a teenager or that's about when most people start trying to do this. Or of course you might be trying when you're later in life, 30 or 40. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You can start at any time. And the difference is that you are making those decisions and you are having to put yourself in that situation of feeling uncomfortable. And as long as you can work through that, then you'll get there. And I try to emphasize that improvising with something known is the way in. And then eventually you might get lucky. And if you practice my little exercise of trying to play something I don't know every day, you'll get good at that. You'll get comfortable in that zone.
Yeah, getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. Absolutely, for sure. Oh my gosh. No, this is amazing. You know what I want to do? Before I want to get into some other topics for a second, but I just want to say this about this amazing book. You can. I got mine from Jamie Aebersold's site. I think it's jazzbooks.either.com or .net. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's also on Amazon as well, right?
I haven't looked myself, but the idea is that it should be up by now. I think it's been out 2.5 months now. So, if you can't get it on Amazon yet, it's within a day or two at this point. I'll check myself after we're done today just to see. And of course, Chuck Sher, chuckshermusic.com is the other place.
Right.
Where,
that's right.
That's probably the easiest way to get it because he's in direct communication with the factory.
Got it. Okay, and I'm just writing this down too, just as a reminder. And I just want to say, so there's 4 main parts to this book, and then there's some other things here too. But we have the foundational skills, the anatomy of a song, building tension with advanced harmony, and deeper mastery. There's something in this book for everybody. But the interesting thing too, the word that came to mind when I was looking through the table of contents was holistic. This is a holistic way of approaching improvisation, and there's definitely, for people that are very beginner to improvisation, he starts off with what is improvisation. And it's a great conversation within that. And even though this says the jazz saxophone book, I'm a trumpet player also. Let me tell you something. This also fits for you all as well, or guitar players. Anybody that wants to be, a creative improviser, a melodic improviser, I think will absolutely benefit from this book. There's no question about it. And, again, yes, there's written examples, but also you've created a ton of videos to, accompany this as well. And I love the fact, one of the things that I'm known for is being very practical. Maybe to a fault for some people, but sorry, that's what I do. That's my mojo. But, you're very practical with this. When you talked about the anatomy of a song, and you go into, the melody, the solo break, right? And, harmonic improvising, rhythmic improvising, trading with the drummer, and a few words together about putting it together a set. That's really cool. That's great information that people don't, they're into like, ooh, I'm going to create this awesome melody. But there's also other things you've got to think about as well.
For sure. And maybe having read the book, you having encountered it in the book, if you're, on the beginning side of getting into this, maybe having read the book, you go to a jam session and you see somebody take a solo break and you're like, oh, that's what Armacost was talking about in that book. That was a solo break. And now you're starting to see, put things together. That was another goal, was to try to give people an idea of what the skills are that you need to go to a jam session and eventually feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is fantastic. And, again, everybody, I'm going to put links in the show notes for sure. And I myself will also be doing my own review of this book as well. I love it. So, unfortunately, it will be biased, but I can't help it. This is great. I only promote things that I think, for me, and we were actually talking about this, honestly, people, we were talking about this before we started to shoot. I promote things that I believe in and things that I use, and this is just incredible to me, for sure. I think this is a great resource for any person that wants to improvise, and you don't just have to be a saxophone player. As a trumpet player, I can get value out of your tone, your section on sound and tone. You can absolutely get value out of that. One big tip I learned from a mentor, when people like sometimes complain, oh, I got to spend $12 on this book or whatever. If you can get one great piece of information from a book or from a video, you've just benefited. You just learned, and you've just expanded your knowledge, and it was well worth it.
Yep. And if you got one thing out of it that lasted you 20 years, then that's less than $1 a year in the end.
That's an awesome way of looking at it. Oh my God, for sure. I have to get better thinking that way. Yeah.
One thing I want to mention too is one of the things that is not immediately apparent if you haven't bought the book yet, but you encountered the videos. Well, I guess it only really matters if you have the book. But anyway, one of the things that I've found myself explaining a few times is that of all the musical examples like Hank Mobley and Sonny Rollins and Stanley Turrentine, the people who I cite in the book, I made a playlist on YouTube for each chapter in the book. So you can go and hear all of the examples that are cited. You can, and I put like the timestamp also. So if I want you to hear something Sonny Rollins played at 1:25 in the track, then you can go to the playlist. That'll be the correct version. The version that I cited. It's the one on the playlist. You can scroll ahead to 1:25 and hear exactly what I'm talking about. So that's something that I think it seems to be pretty intuitive for people to find the explanation videos that I made, but it seems like people are taking a little bit longer to find that I made a playlist for each chapter. So that's just something that I like to point out these days when I talk about it.
That is awesome. And again, you mentioned before, music is an aural experience, AURAL, right? And that just further solidifies, what a great resource this is for sure. Now, speaking of aural, actually, I want to talk about, some of your upcoming projects, but I can't do that quite yet because I got to let people know more about you. And my usual questions like, how did you get started in music? When did you start playing the saxophone? People are going to be very curious about that.
Mm-hmm. So you want to know that?
No. Yeah, I do.
My older brother so my mother's concert pianist. So there was music around. My dad loves jazz. So there were records, I grew up in the LP era. So he was listening to people like Ray Charles. He loved Oscar Peterson, Phil Woods, a whole bunch of people, Charlie Parker. And so through both of my parents, I was exposed to music very early. My older brother started playing cello and then trumpet. He switched to trumpet in 5th grade, I think. So I watched him as he came up into jazz, and the real event that got me interested was hearing Benny Goodman when I was 8 years old. My parents took me to a Benny Goodman concert at Wolf Trap outside of Washington, D.C. It's one of those indoor-outdoor venues, and we were sitting on the grass. They had like that tilted grass where it's kind of amphitheater seating, and I can remember lying back on my back on the grass, listening to Benny Goodman, going, "Yeah, wow, I'm going to be a clarinet player."
Wow.
And then it took about a half year, before, I guess that was just before 4th grade when most kids get a chance to start an instrument in school. So I did that. I started on clarinet. And then my little brother, my little brother started playing alto saxophone when I was 14 or so, and within within a month, he was outblowing me, me with my little clarinet, and so I of course picked the tenor, which was bigger than the alto. and we compete with each other to this day.
It's awesome.
So that's kind of how I got into it, and I met Charlie Shoemake in my first year of college. So I was in the jazz band. My older brother Scott was in the stage band in high school, and I got to hear his class had 4 or 5 very, very talented soloists. So I got to hear some really good high school level kids playing when I was, a early teenager. And so I played all the way through high school and thought I could play a little bit. And then I got to Charlie Shoemake, and he showed me how much work there was to do. And so I got serious about it. I was a little late to the party. I got serious about improvising at 18, 19.
Got it. And it's interesting what you just said too. Your older brother, there were 5 or so really great soloists that you got exposed to at an early age. Yeah. It just reminded me, I went to a combined junior high school, and some people be horrified by that. Like educators are like, oh no, they need to be separated out 6th to 8th grade, 9th to 12th. No, I mean, for me personally, that was the best thing that could have happened, because I got to see the older kids playing. Yep. And there were some great players there, and I was able to be in the jazz band when I was in like 8th grade, where I wouldn't have had that opportunity for a few years later.
Best way to improve, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, your peers that, and when you're younger, your peers that are older than you, but also if you're an adult, peers that may have played a year or more longer than you, and you could see what they've done. It's very inspiring.
Yep, for sure.
Now, in high school, were there any mentors before Charlie Shoemake? Were there any mentors before that maybe, how do I want to word this, that gave you exercises or something like that really helped you? Or was it really just Charlie Shoemake that really just was the mentor for you?
He was the main one, but I did have a teacher. All these years, I still don't know what his first name was. The saxophone teacher at the University of Maryland was called Doc Ross. And I should probably look that up so I know what his first name is. It's easy enough in the information age to find out. But we all knew and loved him as Doc Ross, and he was the first jazz teacher I went to. I probably started going to him when I was 15, 16. And he's the one who gave me a real gift when he said, I think it's about time for you to get a professional saxophone and get a real setup. And I said, okay, what do I do? And he said, you go to Chuck Levin's, which is the sort of main, the Sam Ash of Washington, D.C. area. And he said, you go and you play all the horns. He didn't tell me what Michael Brecker was playing or what Sonny Rollins played or what Coltrane played. He said, play all the horns, find the one that makes you feel good. And then he said, play all the mouthpieces. And he gave me a few names of mouthpiece brands, but he didn't direct me towards one. He just said, try all these and find the one that fits in your mouth. And the one that felt physically comfortable in my mouth was this Berg Larson 105/2 that I've been now playing for 40 some years. And I'm so grateful that the guidance he gave me was use your own physical relationship to the instrument and your own aesthetics, your relationship to the sound of the instrument. Use that as your guide to pick your instrument, not what somebody is playing. Don't try, he headed off at the pass any idea that I was going to get an instrument in order to try to sound like somebody else. He set me up to sound like myself. And I that's the way I try to address, I often get asked questions about mouthpieces and reeds and saxophones, and I always answer it in that way. Go to the store, play as much as you can, and find the one that works for you. And I just did that. So I just followed my own advice, and I did the same thing when I bought a bass clarinet recently. I tried 5 of them, and I tried the most. I didn't want to know how much they costed. I mean, that's a bit of a luxury in my situation today, but I didn't want to know how much they cost. I wanted to know what they sounded like. So I played the most expensive one in the store, and I played the medium one, and I had actually a less expensive one that I had for reference. And among the sort of medium priced ones, there were three, and I played each one of them until one of them started to speak to me. And I did the same thing with the neck, and I did the same thing with the mouthpiece, and I got a Rovner ligature. You'll be pleased to hear.
Yes.
Rovner, do you say?
Yeah.
So I did all that based on what was making my body and my mind happy, not based on what somebody told me I should do.
Well, let me ask you with regard to that. So, in the process, what are you looking for first? Like when people first start out, I always recommend to rent, because you never know. Like if you start an alto, you may find that you're better off on tenor, and vice versa. I always recommend to rent and make sure it's a quality, it's a quality brand, like a Yamaha or Selmer or, whatever. But, how do I want to word this? For you, you probably had an idea of your mouthpiece, but on bass clarinet, did you have the idea of the mouthpiece that you wanted?
No.
Okay.
I didn't.
Just use
I
a
didn't know
stock?
anything. And actually, because that's one of my sort of blind spots, I guess you could say, or one of the holes in my education, which is that because Doc Ross gave me that advice to just pick one mouthpiece and stick with it, I don't know that much.
It's okay.
I know that one works for me. So I took the advice of Michael Northworthy, who was guiding me through this process, and he put a couple of different mouthpieces in my hand, and I had bought one I had bought a Bakun mouthpiece just to get started with, because I like that brand, and I think they make quality products. So I tried one with that, and Michael said, "Well, yeah, this one is not quite the right opening for you. You should try this one." And he got me playing a Selmer, which a Van Doren. Now, see what I mean? This is how it is with me. I just went with the sound. I don't even remember what it is. I think it's a Van Doren. But he said you need a more open mouthpiece, and he said try this, because he knows. And so I was able to trust him to point me in the right direction, and he got me a setup. He helps point me towards a setup that works great for me.
And then with that mouthpiece, then you went out to look at the bass clarinets. Is that what you're saying?
It was all in the same store.
Got it.
He had a handful of things that I could try in his workshop, and I tried the various things. And I had also tried, and I'd gone to a couple other places and tried some other things. So when I found him, I was like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. I trust him. I'm going to follow his advice. But of course, it was my decision in the end. I didn't actually think that the most expensive bass clarinet in the shop sounded better than the one that I was attracted to. And, maybe in the end that would have been ultimately somewhat better, but I still went with the one that spoke to me.
Here's a snag though for you, and thinking about this too. We're pretty much of a similar generation for the most part, where you actually could go to a music store and you could try out. They actually had instruments. Yeah. So now, my gosh, even, I'm in the Los Angeles area, and even when I go to Sam Ash's, they don't have what they used to have. And, they said to me, look, quite frankly, we can't compete with Amazon. We can't compete with, some of these online retailers. So we're not going to keep these things in stock. So for someone who, is in a situation where they don't have a great music store near them that has, has product, let's say, has instruments,
stock,
things in stock, or someone's in a country. I have a student in Bangladesh. There's nothing there,
right.
So what would you recommend for them to do?
As you say, I point people towards Yamaha and Yanagisawa because they're trusted brands. And I also encourage people, depending on where they are, to spend less money at the beginning and make sure it's a good fit, and then you can look further at the professional models. But yeah, I point people towards the brands that I trust. Yamaha, Yanagisawa, and I play a Kuf tenor, which is a Kyleworth, early Kyleworth. So I point people towards those, and if you're in a place like Bangladesh, or I've met some musicians in Bangalore, India, who are in a similar situation, and they could listen to a lot of stuff on the internet. There's quite a bit of information you can get on the internet, and so what I'm driving at is ask people, engage in conversation. There are a lot of people like you, and there's a whole bunch of great saxophone focused resources out there, and you can engage with people who know what they're talking about. You can definitely use the internet to your advantage. And yeah, as far as trying instruments goes, there are some places where you can, have them send you something. You can try it for a month and return it if it doesn't work. That's a much longer process than just going into the store and trying 3 things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Although
don't
there
have
is
a good answer for that one.
there is an advantage to that, though. I found, especially for mouthpieces, I think, I think we were talking about this earlier. I like going to NAMM in Anaheim every year. It's awesome. It's like a candy store. But
Yeah.
the thing is, though, when you try things out at NAMM, it's hard. And the reason why there's a lot of white noise going on in there.
Cacophony. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's crazy. And not only with the white noise that you can hear, but it's also people trying out instruments loudly in your ears, and all the chaos in there. What you may pick at NAMM, I had this happen to me. I picked some stuff out at NAMM one point. I played it at home. After a while, it's like, nah, that's not really it. So there is an advantage to bringing things home. Trying them out there, or if you have like a 7-day, 14-day trial period, bringing it to a gig and seeing how it's going to work. There is definitely some advantages to that, but it's just the question of being able to get it first.
Yeah, and you make a good point of going to NAMM. That's a great resource where you can see everything. That's even better than a music store, actually, because you can see everything there is. Almost everybody's represented. And Jen is another one.
Yes.
You have to be a member, which I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any qualification to join Jen. I think you just pay a membership fee. So that's another conference where you can go and get a lot of information about jazz, hear a lot of great performances, and they have that similar thing to NAMM, where it's just all the music instrument companies are represented, and you can get your hands on things. I always go down to that room, and the cacophony is crazy, but I still enjoy going down there and trying things.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about this in a long time. The predecessor to Jen, I'm pretty sure, was IAJE, International Association of Jazz Educators. And this is when I was back in New York. I remember going to some conferences in New York City, and oh man, those were so good. Those were so good, those conferences.
They're really fun. They become a bit of an intense schmooze fest. So if you have any social anxiety, it can be pretty intense. I wouldn't call myself somebody who has social anxiety, but I am a bit of a extroverted performer, but introverted personality. So for me at Jen, what I need to do is go out and hang, meet everybody, shake hands, talk a lot, and then I need to retreat back to my room for a little while and just chill. That's how I handle that situation.
I'm the same way. I'm definitely the same way when it comes to that. It's just so overwhelming, but it's overwhelming in a fun way. And I would say, the people that want to attend NAMM, they do have, like general admission, passes and stuff like that. You can't bring your instrument in, and I'm not even sure if you could even bring in your mouthpiece, especially, with COVID restrictions. I'm not sure if they're clamping down even more, but it's definitely worth going to. And they have it in Anaheim, usually in the winter. This year it's going to be in the summer, but Nashville's usually every year in the summer as well. But there's incredible people there. Jody Espina from Jody Jazz, wonderful man. I have some of his mouthpieces. The Rovner Peoples from Rovner Products, George and Lynn, they're amazing. There's just so many people there. That's just really great. Theowana, Legere Reeds.
See Morrow from Reed Geek.
Oh, he's awesome.
Like to go talk to him.
Watch his magic. Watch his magic adjusting. The people from Legere Reeds are there as well.
Yeah. I try to watch him work on my reeds and see if I can learn something every year. I haven't been to NAMM for many years. I used to do that every year, but it's been a handful of years now since I was. Oh, I guess I had a conflict in January. Yeah, I started having a regular event that conflicted with the NAMM time period, so I haven't got that back on my schedule.
Yeah, this year it's going to be in June. I forget the exact dates. I think it's towards the not the beginning, somewhere in the middle or something like that. But yeah, it's just an awesome experience, and the performances there are amazing. I've done podcast interviews there. It's just a lot of fun for sure. But yeah, let me bring this back to here though, like projects, upcoming projects that you have. You mentioned the Inevitable Note. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, that one was the victim of a vinyl shortage. So that was supposed to come out right now. But because of the supply chain issues during the pandemic, the supply of vinyl to make LPs was trickled down to nothing. So the company I've been working with for many years, Whirlwind Recordings Inc., they said we're going to release the record, but we have to wait until the fall. So that one's coming out in the fall. That's with Joe Locke and a great rhythm section with Jim Riddle, Kenny Davis, and Rudy Royston. That's almost all my original music. There's an arrangement of a standard, maybe two, and everything else is my original music. So that was recorded 6-8 months ago now, and that, as I said, it's coming out a little later than I hoped, but it'll be out on Whirlwind in the fall on vinyl and as an LP and also as digital files. I don't think they're even making a CD for that one. I think we're to the point now where maybe he'll print 50 or 100 just to send out to journalists, but I don't think there's going to be a CD release of that record, which is fine because then I don't have to store 100 or 1,000 of them in my basement.
That's true. It's funny for me as a consumer. I'm like, oh no, I'm looking at my CD collection right now, and I like to hold it. And yes, I do have a record player, but I like holding it, and I understand it also from the artist's point of view and the record company's point of view, because it's a lot of product that has to get sold, and there's overage and all that kind of thing. So I totally get it, but I'm glad that you mentioned how it will be available.
Yeah, and the kids these days, most of them don't have a CD player, and some of them are starting to buy record players, which is nice. It's kind of cool to see vinyl coming back. So that one's coming out in the fall, and then I have a new one that's very exciting. Also, I just performed at the Jazz Forum here in Tarrytown, just north of New York City, with a band that's been around for a few years, but the pandemic, put it on ice. But we warmed it up, and we just played 2 nights at the Jazz Forum with Al Foster, John Patitucci, Gary Smulyan, and Mike Rodriguez played the gig with us, but Tom Harrell, who was supposed to do that gig, he had a health issue, so he wasn't able to make the gig. Mike Rodriguez played fantastic on the gig, and fortunately, Tom is going to be able to make the recording, and that happens in about 3 weeks. So we're putting that music down, and we'll work on that release date after it's mixed and mastered. That'll go into the pipeline.
Oh, awesome, cool. Do you know if those Tarrytown performances? Did anybody catch those on YouTube?
I don't know. I made a little video for myself.
Good.
To listen to the arrangements, make sure I'm happy with everything. So if one of those looks good and sounds good, I'll probably post one of those.
Cool. Awesome.
As a teaser.
No, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. Now, I know that, and I always mess up how to say this, but on your website, and actually I'm going to look at that right now for me, you basically went to the Sudan, and yes, and there's Ahab Makan, and I know there's a longer title to that, but that music was so intriguing. Can you talk about that experience of being in the Sudan and all that kind of stuff?
Ahaba Makan Watani al Sudan. We didn't know this when we learned the song, but it's kind of like God Bless America. It's one of those songs that everybody knows in Sudan, and that was born from the State Department tours that I did with Paul Beaudry and Pathways about 10, 11, 12 years ago. What Paul would do is he would call ahead to the embassies. This is the Jazz Ambassadors program that's been around for many years, where the U.S. State Department, when I was doing it in partnership with Lincoln Center, Jazz at Lincoln Center, they were sending bands out around the world to be diplomats with music. That's awesome. And it was a fantastic program. They did really cool training for us. And what Paul did is he wrote ahead to all the embassies and said, could you ask your the U.S. embassies always have staff of people from the country. It's not just Americans working in the embassy. In the case of Sudan, there's a bunch of Sudanese who work for the American embassy. He said, can you canvass the locals in the embassy and find out some names of popular songs that everybody knows in the country? And Paul's motivation in doing that was we gave a lot of workshops, and what he wanted to do was show that we were willing to take the time to address the music of the country we were visiting, but then also in our workshops we would play the song in a kind of a traditional way, and then we would play it in a jazz way, and then we would start improvising on it, and they could see the process of how we get to what we do. And it was very effective and joyful. So the group that I went to Sudan with was different from that group, but I stole Paul's idea, and I wrote ahead to the sponsors at the embassy, and I said, could you send us some music? And so long story short, there was a lot of political turmoil, and Sudan's been through a whole big change since we were there. But for various reasons, one of our concerts was canceled, so we were high and dry in Khartoum for a couple of days. And one of the sort of social media director at the embassy, who was a Sudanese national, he said, why don't we record you guys playing this song since we can't go to the concert up north? And I said, yeah, what a great idea. And can you find some Sudanese musicians to play with us? And he said, oh, what a great idea. So we went to the studio the next day, and a whole bunch of us showed up. We shook hands, and who's this other guy? And, oh, well, he's the director. And I said, what do you mean the director? He said, yeah, he's a really famous music video director in Sudan. We're going to make a music video. We're going to travel all over Khartoum.
Wow.
It's so, just from having a concert canceled, talk about seeing the bright side, just from having a concert canceled, all of a sudden we're touring all over Khartoum, shooting and meeting all these amazing people, and everybody's smiling and having a ball. And they turned that into a video that, when it was posted on the American Embassy Facebook page, it got 500,000 views like within hours. And unfortunately, that they migrated it over to YouTube. So you can't see how many people have seen that video on YouTube, but it's still a very nice video. And it's a really cool depiction of us engaging with Khartoum and with Sudanese musicians and dancers, and it was just a fantastic experience. And that all came from us making an arrangement of a song that we were told was beloved by Sudanese people. And you can run into the trouble of, are you being properly respectful when you steal something from another culture? There's some vibe around that now. And fortunately for us, the musicians understood our intent, and the people who watched it also saw it as respect and not as us trying to steal something or make money off it.
Wow, I wasn't honestly even aware of that. Because watching that video, you mentioned the word joyful. Yes, that's what I felt.
Right, it was really good fun.
Oh, yeah. That looked like so much fun, and I love the groove on that. I mean, that was really good. By the way, you can catch that video on Tim's website. Which, you know what? Let me ask you this now before I forget. Where can people find you online?
www.timarmacost.com is my own website. I'm also a member of NYSQ, and that's nysq.org or net.
Okay.
I mean, you can see my level of business engagement right now. Those are the two places that are most focused on my music. And then for the book on YouTube, my channel is called Tim Armacost and the Jazz Saxophone Book.
Oh, got it. So you created a separate channel for the book.
Yeah,
that's
smart. Kind of my personal channel and the book at the same time.
Got it. All right, we're going to definitely put these links in the show notes for sure. And before,
if you don't mind linking to that video, also that one's a little harder to find if you don't know what to look for, because Ahaba Makan Watani Al Sudan is a bit of an obscure title if you're an American. So yeah, if you can link to that too, that'd be nice.
Absolutely. And honestly, it's on your website. It's actually on your website. So
you can find it on my site too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was like. Wow, this is just really so cool. I'm going to ask this question, but first I'm going to answer it for myself. when I first started the podcast, I had a co-host, Nick Manell, and he'd always ask these 5 questions, but I'm just going to take one or two of these. But he would always ask the guests, what's a tool, that you can't live without that's under $100? And for me right now, I'm going to say that it's your book. Because I'm not just saying, I'm being very sincere about this. I'm not just saying that, because normally my response is tonal energy or something like that that's under $100. But this, I'm like so excited to get through this, and it's just really good. But your under $100 tool that you feel like you can't live without, what would it be?
I really appreciate you saying all that, and I have two. One, so as I wrote my book, one of my inspirations, and you said that the book is useful not just for saxophone players, which was one of my goals, and the reason for that is because this book has been so helpful to me. This is Mark Levine's jazz piano book. I'm not a piano player, but I've gotten an enormous amount of inspiration from that book, and I certainly set out writing my book with the intention and the hope that it would be useful to people beyond the saxophone world. So that's one, and the other is Drum Genius. If you want a fun alternative to playing with a metronome, I find Drum Genius. It's an app for the phone or the iPad, and it has a picture of a green face, head, skull on it. It's kind of a funky thing, but it's called Drum Genius, and it has many, many examples of actual drummers playing grooves that you can play along with, and the way the loops are done is very seamless. So you can set one up, and it plays seamlessly without a break. So that's something I use almost every day, especially now as I'm trying to work my way into being more fluent with the bass clarinet. I use Drum Genius almost every day to make myself accountable for playing in time.
Do you for example, you'd go over to the piano, and I think is mine still on? Yeah. So you'd maybe do this, sustain that fifth, and then put the Drum Genius on, having that groove.
Those are two separate things, actually. I do the fifth exercise for like 20 minutes, and then I'll do I'll take 20 minutes to learn something new, and then in the third 20 minutes, I play along with Drum Genius or perform without a metronome. So I'm practicing to perform. Those are my three sort of fundamental 20-minute, 20-minute, 20-minute activities, or half hour each. I'll often do it that way. But I try to hit those. That's my sort of core practice hour. If I can hit that every day, I feel like I'm progressing.
And what's really cool about that too is that you didn't. I have my own core way of practicing as well, but it's like you didn't say, "Okay, I'm practicing my scales. I'm practicing my chords." It's all creative.
Yeah, and when I practice scales, I try to be creative with them. I talk about that in the book too. I try to improvise with the scales. I don't ever do something. I don't ever stop at work. I always try to play. If I need to work on it a little bit so that I can play the scale, obviously I can't improvise it with it if I can't play it. But as soon as I'm able to play it, I immediately try to make something out of it.
And that's something that I have my students do as well. And, as Herbie Hancock calls it tinkering, I call it noodling. And I wish, a couple things. I wish I had you as a teacher when I was younger. But I also wish that, some of these ideas that I came across well after college when I was in graduate school, and actually not even, at Queens, I was taking some courses at other colleges. Man, I wish I had that background. Instead of being taught to read and play at the same time, to encourage to be creative with whatever. If I knew 3 notes, like I teach my students, let's learn 3 notes if they're very beginner. All right, let's be creative with it. Right away. You got to, you lose it if you don't use it,
Yep. And also it's not, the people like Charlie Parker and Lee Morgan and Dexter Gordon who have a recognizable voice. That just didn't happen. It wasn't a miracle. They worked on it.
Yeah.
They worked on it. They worked hard.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, Tim, this has been amazing.
Great joy. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, this was a great improvised conversation, because it really was, like I said. And again, I'm so happy with the success of your book. I mean, I think this should be in everybody's library for sure, whether you play saxophone or not. I just think it's fantastic. I'm so happy that you were encouraged by Chuck Sher to,
me too.
because seriously, this is great.
If I had known it was going to take me 2 years to write it, I never would have started.
But well worth it. Well worth it
Yes, it was.
for you and for us. Thanks again, Tim, so much.
My pleasure. Look forward to meeting you at NAMM or Jen or on tour or one way or another.
Awesome.